All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our final City of the Future 2021 session. It is a pleasure to be introducing today. We're going to be talking about the future of infrastructure, the future of mobility, and the future of a whole bunch of other things. But before we dive in, I'd really like to take a minute to just kind of recap some of the things that we've talked about this year. 2020, I don't think is a secret to anybody that it was a very difficult year. And 2021 was the beginning of our recovery process. And a lot of cities were hard pressed to figure out how best to highlight their communities and to uplift those that are underserved. So a lot of the things that were central to the themes around smart or city of the future this year had to do with equity and making sure that people had access to services. Digital infrastructure was in place, including Wi-Fi and access for people in a host of communities as they were most hard hit when the pandemic came. Some exciting things that happened was the infrastructure bill that is being passed that will allow for a lot of funding to come into these communities so that cities will be able to, make these connections, build bridges, provide access to services around transportation, mobility, as well as digital infrastructure. We've had a host of topics, IoT, AI, public safety, public health and safety, mobility, transportation. It's been quite the year, and it's good to see that things are on the up and up. But the thing at the heart of all of it is community and people, including better urban design, making sure that we are looking at our processes and ensuring that they are equitable for all. Um, we've also talked about funding opportunities and frameworks through ILAs and through different structures and partnerships through innovation hubs. So looking at things like with Epicenter in San Antonio here, we've also looked at the Dallas Innovation Alliance. We've looked at a couple of other really amazing programs and organizations that have uplifted communities and connected things and people throughout the year. Today is going to be an awesome discussion. I'm very excited to pass the torch here in just a few minutes over to Jason Rodriguez, our CEO. But before I do any of that, I also want to encourage everybody to please remember to be engaged on our final discussion. Drop your questions in the chat. We want to hear from you. We want to make sure that this is the most engaging City of the Future session as we are closing out for 2021. Also, a huge thank you has to go out to our team. We couldn't have done this without the team here at Z Prime, let alone without the help of our sponsors. It has been an amazing year. I know we had to pivot and we've extended our sessions, but they've been incredibly valuable and has allowed it for us to be more creative and responsive as a whole. And with that, I will turn things over to Jason Rodriguez to kick us off.
Thanks, Joyce, and then welcome all. Thank you again. As Joyce mentioned, it has been a great journey this past few 8 months, our eighth session and final one for See the Future Virtual. Yeah, just echo Joyce's comments. We've touched on a lot and very excited to give you a glimpse into what might be ahead on some of the key topics we see playing out in 2022. Infrastructure, mobility, and as Joyce mentioned, this community design that is being reimagined over just given all the things we have experienced over the past 2 years. And as Joyce also mentioned, our great partners and teams here, especially CPS Energy, Ricky, Christina, and Unity, who who have really helped us curate some excellent sessions. And with that, we will get right into it. Yeah, drop your questions in the chat. You can also tune in live on LinkedIn as well and ask your questions there, and we'll make sure to get them to our great speakers. So today, to kick it off, to talk about the future of infrastructure, I'm joined by Paul Barham, CPS Energy's Chief Grid Optimization and Resiliency Officer. Paul, such a pleasure to be speaking with you again. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's great to be here, Jason.
Fantastic. And infrastructure has been top of mind across, especially the past 3 months, but it's something we in the utilities industry have talked a lot about, and we've seen a lot of action there. As Joyce opened up with the infrastructure bill being passed, lots of new funding, much needed, coming into the system, but the system's also old, and it's worked amazing, I guess, for the better part of the past 100 years. But we have started to see some of the downside of the aging of it. So today I want to talk with you a little bit about some of those challenges, those technologies, and maybe some of what might be ahead in the future to end off in. So first off, Paul, your title, right, Chief Resiliency Officer. Can you maybe talk a little bit about like one, how you define resilience and what your role is there in the context of the things you're working on at CPS Energy?
Yeah, so my role here at CPS Energy is essentially all the grid aspects of CPS Energy. We operate in the San Antonio, Bexar County area. We cover all of Bexar County and pieces of the surrounding counties. So we operate the distribution and transmission systems for all the customers in that area. And I think the part of my title was to put an emphasis on the resiliency piece. And I think, obviously resilience is part of the generation system. It's part of, all the other things we do. But I think that kind of where it landed on me in particular was the grid, the distribution system is what really touches the customer, right? That's when there's outages in our electric system, that's what the customers feel, that's what they see. And so, we're kind of that last piece of infrastructure in getting the power to our customers. I think, yes, how we view resiliency, what we think about. We're owned by the city of San Antonio, so we consider ourselves a community-owned power company. And I think for us, that puts a particular focus on resiliency for us. Resiliency has always been, one of our pillars that we would point to as that are key to our business. Obviously, the winter storm put some more focus on that, but I think because of our owner and our being part of the community, resiliency for us takes on an aspect of that coordination with our customers. I think it drives us to be far more in touch with how do we impact our customers in terms of our reliability, our resiliency, the services we provide. What does that really ultimately mean for the customer, and how do we work with the customer and stakeholders in making sure our system is resilient and reliable?
Thank you. And as we get into these questions, I also want to just continue to encourage folks to drop their questions in the chat. We'll be checking that throughout the conversation to see if we want to make sure to get questions into Paul here. So Paul, you've seen this resilience conversation change dramatically over the past year, both nationally and in Texas. And one, what have been some of those conversations you're seeing more of? And then another other side of that question is, how have you seen those expectations, especially from the perspective of being community owned?
Yeah, so it's I think certainly the conversation has gotten a lot more attention. I think that we're kind of seeing the wildfires in California, and the nation, different parts of the nation. We're kind of watching that going on and seeing that. But of course, here in Texas and really throughout the whole Midwest, when we experienced Uri, I think it makes that conversation a lot more real for our customers, and certainly, in Texas and ERCOT. Raised that issue to a whole nother level. I think, and you see a lot of different aspects of resiliency being put on the table. I think a lot of, even how do you define resiliency ends up being one of the conversations that's out there. And, you end up, there's a number of different aspects to it, especially when you're thinking about impact to our community. And it's more than just, reliability. I think everyone's, come to that conclusion that, it's not just about outages. It's how do we, how does the impact of these events translate into impacts to our community? So is it, how long does it take us to restore? How well have we prepared for these events? How well have we prepared our community for these events? Because there's always going to be scenarios that you will not be able to fully prevent. I think we're seeing an example up in Kentucky and up in that area, and I know we were talking about that earlier, but I think that drives us to really a lot broader conversation about resiliency and what that means. And I think another aspect that it also raises is that it's not just one system, right? We talk about the electric grid, but ultimately we're kind of a grid of grids. We have the electric grid, but the electric grid is dependent on the natural gas grid and system. The water system, water resiliency is, as we saw during Winter Storm Uri, water availability became an issue because of water's dependence on the electric system, and really vice versa, as well as communication systems. So I think this, another part of this conversation is really around, it's not just one thing. It's not just the electric grid. I mean, obviously that's the part I'm, immediately engaged in and responsible for, but we depend on other infrastructure systems, just like they depend on us. And in the conversation, both in ERCOT as well as nationally, what you saw in the FERC report pointed out, how critical the interdependency between particularly natural gas and electricity is, and really some of the work and focus that needs to happen there.
Yeah, as as this conversation is the future of infrastructure, as thinking about it and then just discussing it with you over these past few days, that's one point hopefully our audience takes home and looks to the future with, is that this, as you described, this interdependency of systems in a way, and looking at it just through what we can accomplish through the electric side and even just the gas side is this broader conversation. And you've seen that conversation happen at the industry level. I think all of us, hopefully some action we take for how can we let consumers know what they can do and how these things are all interrelated, because that's super important. We'll probably be hearing more of unfortunately, we probably will have more instances of severe storms or fires or whatever that next event is. And I think you also have described it as insurance before, and that resonates with me, but it also resonates me because I'm a father of 4. And the concept of insurance is very different for a parent than it is probably someone younger as well. So a lot's there, and I appreciate you really explaining it like that. So moving the conversation on to some of the technologies, because obviously the technology and the advancement of it is going to play a huge role, and hopefully it helps us get to and meet some of those goals. So what are 1 or 2 of those technologies that excites you when it comes to being able to enhance grid resilience?
I think probably the one, I'll say technology and is microgrids. I think that is getting to be out there more, a concept that more people are seeing. And I think that concept really stands to have significant impacts on the grid, on resiliency, on how the grid operates. But I would say, when you think about microgrid, and there's different ways to define what a microgrid is, and different entities have different views on that. But when you think about it, that's really a concept that's been enabled by really a number of different other technologies that we see, becoming viable, both from a performance and a financial aspect. So solar, battery storage, local generation. I think you're starting to see, fuel cells have been around for a while, but those continue to develop and become a component. Controls, both in controlling a microgrid, which is actually not a simple task, right? Managing all these components, but then you also think about load control, which almost for a truly functioning microgrid, control the load piece is also an important factor there. So microgrid as a concept, I think, is a big piece that's going to play in how we provide more resilience and resiliency services in the electric grid. But that technology continues to develop. I think continues to grow, and finding ways that we can plug that into our systems and in cost-effective ways is one of the challenges that kind of is out there. You mentioned the discussion of insurance. So when we talk about resiliency, it's almost like an insurance discussion that nobody wants to pay for insurance until it's really needed. Well, so resiliency is one of those investments that you hope you don't need, but it is a infrastructure investment that is absolutely needed. And I think probably broader among the industry as well as society are going to have to really think through what is it we need in terms of resiliency levels, and where are those best investments to provide that for our communities.
Fantastic. I want to take it to a question here that we got in. It says, infrastructure involves multiple stakeholders, as you mentioned, and asset owners. So how do you work with others in the city to effectively coordinate city works, and what messages would you have for other cities?
Yeah, so I think being owned by the city, tends to drive us in that direction anyway. But I will say, since the Uri event, we have obviously driven further on that. In San Antonio, we have a emergency operations center that is both a physical location in San Antonio, but it's also a group of all those key entities in the San Antonio area. And so that provides us a good avenue to plug into and really coordinate with all of the other key stakeholders in the Bexar County area, including, obviously fire and police, sheriff, but also healthcare. There is STRAC is one of the organizations in the EOC, and they are that interface out to healthcare and hospitals, and obviously another key part of what needs to be into that planning and collaboration effort. And so I think we have had really good collaboration, planning, doing a lot of tabletops this past year with our partner agencies, which I think has really done a lot of good for us in preparing for any future events.
Okay. And had another question, I think that we came in from the audience here. So as Paul, cities are moving fast towards, or some are moving towards full electrification, fleets, first responders, police vehicles, other agencies, they say their fleets are coming first. So in an assumption where the power grid might be down for extended periods of time, what type of strategy should be considered? So the question is, what type of strategy should be adopted or considered to ensure the continuous availability of some of these new hybrid or electric vehicles in that type of extreme outage scenario?
Yeah, that is a really good question.
Tough.
And actually, one we have contemplated internally, as we have some hybrid vehicles that we've tested and have also looked at what electric fleet might look like, both from a utility truck perspective as well as passenger vehicles and trucks. So I think looking at how you provide resiliency to those critical fleets is, I'm going to say, an area that is going to have to get continued focus. At the moment in San Antonio, we don't have right now any large electric fleet users, but it is something that we do have our eye on, and we've been looking at. And how do you, there's a challenge just in supplying those, because they tend to be really large loads. And then the question that's asked is kind of that next step. Then if it's a critical like fire, police, how do you provide that resiliency? And I think it's some of the same solutions that I've been talking about in terms of microgrid type solutions, where there would be capability of probably separating out that part of the grid, with some manner of supplying that generation. And in something that's critical like that, you're going to at this point in time probably not rely completely on renewables, because you don't know that those will be available. So it's going to be renewables plus storage plus some type of reliable fueled generation set. So that would probably be what the solution would generally look like, at least with the technologies that we have available to us now.
Great, thanks. And thank you for the question out there as well. We have a few more questions getting in there, but I have a few more for Paul. But I think we have plenty of time to continue to get questions in. So please keep sending them in. So the current system, as I mentioned, is it's aged, and we're probably at the life end of it. So what types of challenges does this create in your role, and maybe others in your role, when you're having to evaluate these technologies that you're mentioning, and the challenges? How do you prioritize these, and what are some of those changes that you also take into account that might occur, that might impact the decisions made today to really account for this changing grid?
Boy, there's that's a long list of challenges
Yeah.
there. I think and one of the things that we're probably trying to think about right now is just the just changes in the planning aspects. So how do we need to plan the grid differently? Because it is different even right now, as we are seeing increasing amounts of two-way flow in our grid. The grid was originally designed assuming that generators would make power and they would push it out to users, and that was the flow, and that was what you designed around. That's not what we're seeing anymore. So even just from the starting point, just the how do you plan for a future grid? Part of that planning is also what is the technology that we're going to plan for. And that's a tough one. People my age always use the VHS versus versus Betamax technology battle, right? So you want to make sure you're making the right bet, because when you think about electric infrastructure, it is some people have referred to the grid as the largest machine in the world, largest machine on the planet, right? And that's probably true. Changes, transformation of the grid does not happen overnight, and there's probably nothing we do that's small. We don't have dozens of transformers. We have hundreds of thousands of transformers just in San Antonio and CPS Energy. So making changes is something that is going to be a many-year process. So I think to that point, we continue to look at what are those technologies we see out there. What are the needs of the customers as we think about certainly this resiliency aspect, and how do you start designing those things into our standards as we move forward. The ability to or building more flexibility into our grid operations is probably one of the key aspects that we're trying to do at this point through how we control, having visibility into the system, so that as new technologies are hitting the grid, and those technologies may be things that we, the utility, are doing, or it may be technologies that are happening on the customer side, such as solar, battery storage. A lot of that is happening just by customers installing it, whether residential, commercial, for their own resiliency purposes. But how do we make sure that we are building a grid that is flexible to incorporate those things in over the long term? So probably a lot of challenges in looking at how we transform the grid into whether that's 2.0, 3.0, or whatever version we're on. I think the redesign of the grid has kind of been a thing ever since Edison and Tesla were arguing about AC and DC. And actually, that it's still an argument today, right?
Yeah.
There's still applications, even more so now, for DC components into our grid. That's a whole nother technology discussion. But I think to the question, I think a lot of it is around how do we ensure that we are building a system that is flexible to incorporate much more distributed energy resources and aspects, and being able to manage those, whether they are owned and operated by the utility or on the customer end.
Thank you. Want to come back to that here on the flexible grid, but there was a good question that also speaks to the challenges that came in the chat from LinkedIn, because the conversation of equity and the transition has also come to the forefront. When we think of families that can move their families, can afford to move families to different parts of the state or different states. Frankly, we're probably seeing some of that here in Texas from fires in California. So that leaves low-income communities, and how do they deal with that, whether it's the age of their home. And I think we actually might have talked about this early on, of how can you prepare for storms better, and how we can ensure broadly as a community, as industry, to make sure that they're not left out in regard to this changing grid. And it's not just those who can afford it who really can bring that the batteries and solar and that. So and I know you guys think a lot about this. So I just want to get some thoughts or ideas you might have to share with the audience.
Yes, that is definitely a big consideration for us, and really an area where we look to partner with the city. Kind of by the nature of who we are, CPS Energy as an entity, we are do a lot more with our customers than just provide energy. We have extensive low-income customer programs where we really work with our customers to find solutions to the challenges that they're faced with. Working with numerous partners across Bexar County and doing that. I think this is an area in particular where we work to partner with the city of San Antonio, Bexar County, and other entities like that in helping us to make sure that our investments are equitable, are taking into account those broader impacts. One of the unintended consequences that I think you alluded to a bit is, if you think about any customer right now can install their own generator and solar and battery, and they can put in essentially their own microgrid, and in an emergency load shed, they can disconnect from the grid. I mean, there's nothing that keeps any customer, and some customers do that now. Obviously, customers with plenty of money to spend on that kind of thing. What you don't want to end up with is, customers who have, are maybe even supplying the grid through distributed resources in times of emergency, then disconnecting from the grid, because it will then leave the grid in a worse shape, right? So I think working through how do we make sure that as utility in a city and a community, we're providing solutions that address all parts of our community. One of the discussions we're starting to have with the city of San Antonio is around resiliency hubs, and we had Sandia Labs in here doing some work with us over the past year or two, looking at this aspect and some opportunities in this area. So that is probably one of those ideas that we will be pursuing with the city. The city has budget money, and I think through the grant programs and infrastructure money that's been identified federally, I think those types of solutions are really ripe candidates for submissions for those grant funds to support solutions like that in our community. And then I think the other aspect is, as we are better defining these things, how do we make sure that is essentially part of our system design as we build out, that we're it's much more cost effective to integrate these things, resiliency, into the design up front and build it that way than to come back later and retrofit things. So I think it's all these pieces, I think, pulling together as we move forward.
Thanks, Paul. So last question, we have 30 seconds. So you touched on this, what some of this future grid might look like. Can you just expand on this hybrid flexibility that you see the grid taking shape in?
Yeah, I think, ultimately, I think what you see, now it's kind of these individual, microgrids. But I think, longer term, what you see is, that hybrid flexibility being built in at a much more integrated level, where parts of the grid can readily separate and readily reconnect. That's not necessarily a seamless or simple thing now, but I think as we think about the grid of the future, kind of these grid forming microgrids or subgrids. I think that is kind of a concept that a lot of the industry is starting to look at and thinking about, what does it take to kind of make that happen, almost from a autonomous, control aspect. But having that integration back into a stable, broader grid, I think is generally always going to have its advantages as well. So
Okay.
I think as you mentioned, hybrid model, but I think there's a lot more to come.
All right, Paul. Well, we touched on a lot. We appreciate that. Thank you for joining us this last City of the Future. Have a great day there. And I will jump us right back into Laurel Morris and a great panel to talk about the future of mobility.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason and Paul. A key component woven into that conversation about the future of infrastructure is the future of mobility. So today we have 3 all-star mobility thought leaders with us, Amy, Kelly, and Terry. Could you all briefly introduce yourselves and your role in this exciting mobility space?
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Ashley. I'm with Austin Energy Electric Vehicles and Emerging Technologies team. I am the senior lead for the EV Equity Program, working to bring infrastructure deployment, program design, and community development with a focus on historically underserved community members.
Excellent. Kelly?
I'm Kelly Coiner. I'm usually known as Mobility Mama for the blogging work that I do, but I'm the co-founder of Innovation for Mobility. And what I do is I help cities and technology companies talk to each other so that they can form partnerships to bring these technologies to scale.
Great. Terry Travis, managing partner and co-founder of EV Noir. The focus of our work is e-mobility best practices. So we work on fleet electrification, multimodal expansion. So everything from e-bikes and scooters all the way up to Class 8 heavy duty freight, as well as looking at this through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion to ensure that as we go through this transition, that all facets of communities are able to benefit from this, but have been working in the space for quite some time. So glad to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Terry. To get to know you all better in true Z Prime fashion, we have a quick speed round, starting with the question, what vehicle do you all drive?
I can start, I guess we'll go in alphabetical order. I'm a new owner of the Tesla Model 3.
I don't drive anything. I travel by foot, by bus, other people driving me in cars, and I'm hoping that if Santa listens to me, I'll be driving an EV cargo bike.
Yeah. So for me, it varies. We do a lot of vehicle reviews, and we do a lot of, we're working with a number of OEMs. So it varies from day to day, but I have experience. I'm a car, I grew up in a car family. And so, on any given day, it may be a varying EV, but to rest assured, it's going to be an EV.
Right on. Next question is, what's something you believe that other people may think is crazy?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we're going to see EV adoption a lot quicker, I think, than what maybe the general public is thinking. And, you know, from an Austin perspective, we expect to see that there's going to be 40% of vehicle miles traveled will be electric vehicles. And so we're really working towards that. And year over year, we're seeing the adoption increase. It's becoming more normalized and accessible. So I think some people may think that that's crazy, but I think especially with the new pickup trucks here in Texas that are going electric, it's going to really start to accelerate.
Kelly?
I think automated vehicles can make the world better. They can provide more equitable mobility, and they can help clean up the mess that we've made of climate. And a lot of people think that's crazy because I think that we're going to end up with zombie cars on every freeway, but I think we have a lot of ways that we can make that better. And interestingly, the place that I have found where people least think I'm crazy is Texas, my home state.
Yeah, if I had to say what people, what I say that I think, you know, people think is crazy is that EVs are for all communities. We do a lot of work across country, and there are many places that we're in, and we start talking about, you know, EVs, AV, etc. And folks are just like, oh, those are for, you know, wealthy 1%ers. And when you begin to show folks that there are, you know, varying EVs at varying price points, that, you know, pre-owned vehicles starting at $5,000 all the way up to whatever it is that you want to drive. The idea is that it really is startling for folks who haven't been working in the space. And so that always astonishes me, you know, the fact that folks just don't know how many available vehicles there are. They think that we're crazy when we say EVs are really for all communities.
Absolutely. I'm sure all of the panelists would agree as well. And diving into the future of mobility discussion, especially from the city's perspective, equity is a key issue. And Amy, you have led many inclusive mobility efforts in Austin. How do you think cities can roll out programs that address equity, affordability, and inclusion?
You know, I think it really is all about collaboration, because we can't, you know, push forward this massive transformation without working together. And when you collaborate, I'm talking about not just kind of private partnerships or even energy companies working with, you know, corporations. I'm talking about bringing in people. One of the things that we've done here in Austin is we've just launched, with the approval from the City Council, our new Austin Climate Equity Plan. And it's a wonderful piece that is going to help us meet our greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2040. And in order to do that, you know, we have to come together as a community, and we have to reach everyone in the community, not just a niche group. It's everyone that has to come together. What we did with this plan is we worked with community people. Everyday people stepped up and became a part of this work group to make sure that we're capturing the needs of our community. We want to ensure that we're not coming up with solutions that are not, you know, idea driven by everyday people that are going to be impacted by this. And so I would say, you know, collaboration and creating human-centered design programs with the community.
Right. Collaboration is definitely key, and SMUD has taken on that approach as well, with involving the community and planning, and they've seen a lot of success with that. So I'm sure you will see more advancement with mobility inclusion with that as well. Terry or Kelly, do you have additional thoughts around affordability and equity and mobility?
I'm hoping Terry's going to tell us about all the cool stuff that EV Noir is doing to make sure it happens, then I'd be glad to talk a little bit about the policy side.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, so for us, it is at the core of what we do just because of the makeup of our team. We just facilitated about 3 weeks ago our national e-mobility diversity equity inclusion conference, where we took a serious dive into what that looks like from a policy, programs, and practice vantage point. There are any number of things that we can be doing, but at the core of it, goes back to what Amy was mentioning. It really, if you're going to think about how communities can have equitable access and be included in this revolution or disruption, communities have to be a part of the process, not just at the end, but when we are working with cities, one of the things that we say to them, to stakeholders, is that communities have to be engaged first and often, and they can't be the afterthought. They should be inclusion and equity and diversity should be at the core of any pilot, program, or practice. And so it's really critically important. Those who are closest to the problem are also closest to the solution. So that would be turning it over to you, Kelly.
And I think that from all the different people who are playing in it, metrics matter, and you need to set things that people can see quantitatively. So, for example, I think probably the most important one at the federal level is what's called Justice 40, which says that all investments we make in climate change, including electrification, need to benefit underserved and disadvantaged communities. They need to get 40% of that benefit. And it just makes all the difference in the world to say we're going to put numbers on this and not make it squishy. I think the other thing is to realize that that equity is not just, it starts with bringing the right people to the table, but it's not enough. Equity means thinking about access, increasing mobility opportunities, making sure that people who are not only on affordability, but on accessibility can use these systems. And it means paying attention to infrastructure. And some of that infrastructure is about blocking people's access to new mobility. And some of it is places where we can build more access to it by the way we invest in infrastructure.
Exactly. And mobility is changing so rapidly. Cities will have to address mobility much differently moving into the future. Terry, you've worked with over 25 of the largest cities in the country on their cities' mobility strategies, as well as with the White House. What have you learned, and what is some of the advice that you would give to cities on refining their mobility strategy?
I mean, it varies from region to region and city to city, but what I would absolutely say is do the pre-work first. One of the things that we're seeing in this space and in some of the projects and pilots that we're working on is that every city is different in how they're approaching, how they're coming to this conversation and what their experiences are. But there's a lot of pre-work that needs to be done. We are, we're looking at the, Infrastructure and Jobs Act. We're looking at Build Back Better. As all of these things begin to converge, cities are going to have to do pre-work so that they'll be better prepared, landscape assessments, community engagement, understanding where the attitudes, knowledge, and beliefs are of consumers in their various markets. And really doing taking a data-driven approach is going to be as well critically important. But it really comes down to understanding what your local landscape is and how you can best position yourself to actually move forward to this cleaner and greener future that provides access for all communities in a way that is just in a transition that just doesn't benefit one or a small segment of society, but all consumers. And I would just say that those are some of the high level things that I would suggest that cities begin to think through.
Right. Amy, do you have any advice for cities around their mobility strategies?
I too, I appreciate what you were saying there, Terry, and I think that, we can even drill it down further, and we can kind of look at the entire ecosystem of mobility options. And it does start with sort of a lot of pre-work. For example, safe bike lanes. We need to make sure that, those, if we want to make a transition to alternative mobility, particularly around micromobility, we need to make sure that we have the safe bike lanes for people to travel in. One of the things that we're working on right now, it's really exciting with the Housing Authority of the City of Austin, is we have a program where we launched an outreach, a video campaign for training for micromobility, for e-bike safety, and the usage of our bike share, our electric bike share fleet here in Austin. And now that, well, I'd like to say the pandemic is starting to calm down, we're hoping that we're going to continue forward with that, even with these new variants. But as soon as we do, we'll be meeting in person to do in-person training, hands-on training. We are already, participating in the resident meetings and just, building on that trust and getting to know the community there and taking their feedback and, just working hand in hand around helping encourage how people can participate in an ecosystem of e-mobility, particularly with our low-income communities, because we know that access transportation can provide upward mobility, which is employment opportunity. So I think in this conversation, as we're talking about electric vehicles, we need to also think about how do we deploy and get the city and get the people on micromobility as well.
That's a great point to add in the levels of mobility, including bikes and whatnot, because it's also connected to employment. Kelly, you have some really interesting perspectives on moving beyond pilots. What do you have to add for the city strategies around mobility?
So you're right. I've spent a lot of time in the last several years working with cities on these strategies. And I said that I liked that when I came to Texas, people actually didn't think I was crazy, but I was really interested to find that when I worked in Tulsa, they also didn't think I was crazy. We just finished a strategy that is designed to move electrification, shared mobility, and automation from just sort of piloting it to going full scale. And the way that you form the pilot is really critical. It needs to be in partnership with the people it's going to serve, with the people in the city who are in the state who have responsibility for transportation, and also infrastructure, because particularly with e-mobility, you've got to have the electrical charging infrastructure in place to support it. And you need to have a partnership with the technology companies. And the biggest problem is that what typically happens is a private sector company comes in and invests money in a pilot. No one has a real conversation about what's going to make that a sustainable business model. And then you're done. And that happens, that's not just a high class problem. That's everybody's problem. In the city of Detroit, they did a lot of interesting pilots, but had a hard time with how do you sustain equitable transportation beyond the initial pilot, because it wasn't structured that way in the first place. So what I would say is that taking something to scale all starts with the pilot process. It needs to engage multiple players. It needs to have skin in the game from multiple funders. I like to talk about new P3s that are private sector, public sector, and philanthropic sector. And it needs to be structured to be sustainable beyond the pilot.
That was really great advice. We've mentioned throughout our conversation effective communication over and over again, and effective communication of mobility opportunities is key. Starting with Amy, what do you see as the best practices for engaging consumers, and how do you communicate the benefits of new electric mobility to communities?
I mean, I think the most important thing in this work right now is really education, outreach and education. And we have a program we've seen a lot of success in that we've built out with sustainability in mind. Kelly, I think that was great advice. It's being in for the long haul and long term. And this program is called EVs for Schools. It launched in Austin and for the first 4 pilot schools for Title I schools here in Austin, combines electric vehicle charging with EV curriculum. The kiddos are seeing their heroes, the teachers. We have quite a few teachers in Austin that drive used EVs and they wanted workplace charging. So they're charging their EVs. The kids are seeing their heroes plugging in and they're getting the curriculum. We've created an educational living lab. We started in the 4 schools. Now we're in over 122 schools across Central Texas with this program. So we know that what's happening when these kids are exposed to this behavior shift, they're exposed to the curricula around this, that they are getting excited. When we're doing outreach in the schools, which we've done some wonderful stuff with Z Prime, who's created a beautiful virtual reality piece for us to utilize with the students. We see the kids super excited and wanting to be a part of the solution. They understand that climate impact is going to be one of the greatest challenges of their generation. And they want to know and learn how they can be a part of it. So we are thrilled to have this project. And, we know that the conversation at the dinner table is now being shifted. The kids are educating the parents. So I say education, education, education first. And really, that's how we sort of start to see this shift in new mobility.
Right. I'm excited to see kids educate their parents first, kind of like how we have with helping our parents with smartphones and navigating all new technologies. I'd also like to shout out your mascot. Austin Energy's mascot is a T-Rex. What's its name? Stevie?
Yeah, Stevie, the EV11 T-Rex. Stevie is a dino for the people. Yeah, we have a great video campaign, and Stevie's, thought leader and scientist with millions of years of experience and very effective in our marketing campaigns.
And I think another utility recently copied that strategy with their own mascot for EVs.
Stevie has cousins throughout the US.
Oh, we have a question from the chat. Amy, do you know of plans for electrification of school buses in the Austin area?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's been something we've been working on for a long time. We just had a really cool demo at Austin Energy. We brought in Lion Electric, who was on tour, to come, and we brought in, the school districts and all of the partners that could potentially support this. Very exciting, and things are looking up. I hope to report a little bit more when I'm able to, but I think that we're going to be seeing some cool movement positively in this upcoming year here in Austin.
Right. I love electric school buses. I'm excited to see that come into reality. Back to the conversation about effective communication and engaging consumers, Terry and Kelly, what has been your experience with this? What would you advise?
I have not had a lot of experience with engaging on consumers in connecting them to the technology. I've studied more what helps them move in that direction. But I think that overall it's helping people, everybody who's at the table, understand that there are things that we do now that make it happen. It's not like the future's determined and going forward. And there's a story, and Jason's heard me tell it a zillion times, but I'm going to tell it again anyway. In the 1890s, there was an advertisement in the San Antonio Light Express, or their predecessor, that was of horseless carriages and horses and carriages. And those horseless carriages were electric. They were not internal combustion engines. And but it didn't catch on. So why didn't it catch on? Well, because of choices that we made. The vehicles actually were cost competitive to the ones that Mr. Ford was producing in Detroit, and they were they had a pretty long battery range. It was 70 miles, battery range, but there was no infrastructure to support it. That electric infrastructure didn't happen until the late 20s and into the 30s, to take electricity beyond factories to cities and the like. And I think that it's connecting with the range of different interests that they're the things that they can do, because those are sort of tangible things. I think the same thing is figuring out with how to get consumers. What we want is for them to ride in electric vehicles, whether they drive them or they're on a bus or on an electric bike, or using it for cargo. And it's partly educational in the way that Amy said, but it's also making it affordable and supportable to do that.
That cues you up really well, Terry, getting people into EVs and really driving them.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've been really zeroed in on. So we have a number of programs that speak to that. It's really important, as Amy mentioned earlier, and Kelly drove home as well. Education and outreach is critically important, but also engagement. People need to understand, and we need to normalize multimodal electrification, whether it's e-bikes and scooters, whether that's passenger vehicles, school buses, electrified mass transit. We need to really normalize this for folks. To that effort, we have in 2019, we facilitated the second largest electric vehicle event in the country. And then 2020, we partnered with we partnered with Plug in America, Sierra Club, and Electric Auto Association to present National Drive Electric Week. So now being one of the presenters of that, and that's actually the globe's largest electric vehicle engagement event. It's over 10 days, and obviously it engages several hundred thousands of consumers around the world on electrification and EVs. And the idea is, what we see is that in order to get people to make this behavioral change, to switch and begin to even open up, their thoughts to adopting an EV lifestyle, we have to have that initial engagement that sparks that behavioral change, that takes them through the funnel from awareness to EV ownership. And we have to also do this in a way that is culturally relevant and meet folks where they are. We have programs that we've designed that target students and communities around HBCUs, HSIs. We have a STEM-based program. We have a program that deals with API communities. The idea is that there's this one-size-fits-all model that we traditionally have utilized doesn't really work well when it comes to things like vehicles and mobility. And so what we really have to do is do that initial pre-work, find out where communities are, find out where consumers are with this, and then meet them where they are and give them what they need to be able to make that transition.
Great points there. Meeting people where they are to transition them. Circling back to speed round questions to end our session today. What would you put on a billboard, a phrase or word or an image? Amy?
Yeah, I think there's so much to put out there. I think if you have to drive it down to just one, I would say I have a program that I launched at Austin Energy and I'm leading. It's called EVs Are for Everyone. And that really is the messaging that we're working on to try to make sure that everyone sees themselves in these vehicles, and how do we go about including everyone. So I demystify that technology and just put out there on a billboard, EVs Are for Everyone.
Right on. Kelly?
I just popped up my screen background. I'd put ACEs on it. It's kind of wonky, but it's for accessible, automated, connected, electric, and shared. So I'd love to see this on billboards all over the place.
And I would say, if you had to ask me what to put on a billboard, I would probably say, the e-mobility transition is too important to get wrong. We have to act for just transition with the urgency of now. We just returned from Scotland, and it was stark to see the difference in terms of how the rest of the world was looking at climate change and the need for multimodal electrification, compared to what we are experiencing back here domestically. And I would just say that there's a serious urgency of now, because there are communities, when we think about this transition, for some communities, the transition to electric vehicles can be, a gradual challenge and change. For other communities, it's a literal matter of life and death. And so with that, we have to act with the urgency of now. I don't think that we've done as an ecosystem, I don't think that we've done enough to really help folks understand the negative impacts of transportation emissions and what it is happening, what it is wreaking, and impacts that it's having on specific communities, particularly those that are underrepresented in these conversations.
A follow-up question for you, Kelly, from your billboard answer. Do you think that autonomous means electric in the future?
Has to.
Has to.
Yep. There's a lot of advantages to merging the two. For one, if we can build the stack of autonomy on top of an electric vehicle much more easily than not. And it allows us to make investments in those electric vehicles now and then automate them as the technology matures. Electric vehicles are also much lighter, and they don't have as many parts and problems, and so that that also helps with sort of bring down the unit costs. So I do, and I think it's really interesting to go back to my Tulsa example. We had the rare case of where our strategy was given legs in the middle of putting the strategy together, when Canoe located its mega micro plant outside of Tulsa, would bring 2,000 jobs to it. And their whole structure is to build a skateboard platform that can be used for lots of different vehicles and automate it. So yeah, I think that the two come together.
I would add to that and just say that we're working on a number of AV projects, and I can't think of anyone that is moving forward with any autonomous projects where they're looking to bring those to market utilizing internal combustion engine vehicles. And so
I think the only place you're really seeing that is in the heavy vehicle space, in trucking, where some of the early prototypes are, but they would like to move it on.
But yeah, their go-to-market strategy is basically around hydrogen and battery electric, heavy freight. So I think that, when you start looking at the business case for this, there aren't very many players in the space that are thinking about autonomous vehicles being internal combustion engine vehicles. And if you think about the investment that, the OEMs or auto manufacturers are making, we're at an inflection point where there's $500 billion being invested globally in transportation electrification. So that means, to me, we've hit that inflection point where we'll see things, through a very different lens very soon.
Right, we have reached that inflection point. And it's been a pleasure chatting with you all today. I love all of your energy. I'd like to highlight a few of my favorite quotes from you. Those closest to the problem should be closest to the solution, with involving vulnerable communities at the beginning of designing mobility programs is key. And then Kelly talking about EV mobility policy, that making 40% of EV mobility programs must benefit vulnerable communities. really putting that number on it within policies is moving the needle, and then involving kids and EV curriculum and engagement, because kids really want to be a part of the solution. And that is the end of our Future of Mobility chat. Dylan will predict the future of urban and community design up next.
Thank you so much, everybody. Happy
Thanks.
holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Laurel. Hope everyone's having a good City of the Future so far. Time to get into the last session of the day, last session of the year for the COF series. We're going to be talking about the future of urban and community design. I've got some great folks here to talk with me about that today. First, we have my good friend Anita Ledbetter, Executive Director from Build San Antonio Green. Welcome, Anita. Might be muted.
Thanks, Dylan.
Happy to have you. And we also have Executive Director of Solar Austin, Tatiana Cannon. Welcome, Tatiana. How are you doing?
Hey, everyone. I'm great. I'm a little more baritone than usual. I'm warning people. I don't always sound like this, but y'all get the slightly alto version of me today.
I mean, I think it sounds commanding.
That's what I'm going for. Very Elizabeth Holmes, don't you think?
Yeah, I don't know if that's the best analog, but sure.
She got a lot of money. I don't know.
You know, she sure did.
Yeah. Let's not fast forward to present day.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so let's get into it. You know, urban design is increasingly shifting to focus on community design, which means prioritizing communities' well-being above anything else, and aligning urban planning and design around principles of equity and inclusion and the collective interest. And cities like Austin and San Antonio are showing growth beyond development by taking active measures toward diversity and inclusivity. So I'm going to just start by, we'll start by looking at your organization specifically. How are you helping create sustainable and equitable communities in your respective cities? And Tatiana, we'll start with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the wonderful tee up. For those who I assume most are familiar with Solar Austin, I am new to Solar Austin as the inaugural executive director. But before me, Solar Austin has a 20-year history of being completely volunteer run and led, a truly exceptional organization that I am honored to take the baton and continue running this incredible race. So Solar Austin, just to give a tiny bit of context, is a 501c3 and C4. So we have the ability to act as a nonprofit and also as a policy advocate agency. So we are uniquely positioned in the community in that we are kind of allowed to talk to anyone and everyone about solar. And so with that, Solar Austin has always been committed to the tenets of equity and inclusion alongside that sustainability. And with that, our programming, one of our flagship programs, really kind of speaks to the heart of that. It's our Pathways to Clean Energy Careers program. And what it is we each semester take time. It was initially a pilot with Houston Tillotson University, I should say. And it is now 5 semesters young. And each semester we recruit college students as well as companies. And we specifically recruit diverse candidates. So in terms of clean energy, that includes female candidates, as well as diversity of race, gender, ethnicity. And we work with companies to find internships that really fit the internship level, and as well that it might fit an intern who doesn't have a ton of previous experience, because we really want the introduction into clean energy careers. And throughout the program, the Pathways program, as we place interns in clean energy careers, we continue to provide wraparound support. So what that means is we are meeting regularly with the companies as well as with the students. We're doing resume workshops, we're doing diversity and inclusion training, we're doing one-on-one interventions. And the whole goal is to truly be a conduit of diversity into clean energy. With that, we've received a lot of feedback that everybody needs interns. Interns are great. We love them. Solar Austin needs them too. Everybody's in on interns. We need installers as well, right? Like we have this very huge looming need. So as Solar Austin, we're trying to build out community programming where we can train those who maybe want a workforce shift to learn the 101 of solar installation. We're partnering with Del Valley ISD to begin a program there in their opportunity center to get a diverse pipeline able to be hired really quickly. And that is one example I give as pathways sort of as a package. And with that, as Solar Austin, we're always still working on that policy as well. How can we continue keep having solar be accessible to all communities, whether as a career, as a residential option, as a shared solar option. So yeah, Solar Austin, that was a lot of words in my monologue to say that ultimately we are completely founded on the idea of how can we be a conduit of solar knowledge, solar opportunity, and actual solar power. So again, honored to do that work. So excited to let Anita share more of what's happening in her neck of the woods, but that's a little bit about who we are.
Yeah, and we'll definitely be discussing community solar a bit more going as we get further into the discussion. We've already had a question come in about it, but before that, I do want Anita to take it away with what you're doing in San Antonio.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. I just want to first say thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this panel. Huge fan of Z Prime, huge fan of this series, and Tatiana, it's an honor to meet you, and so excited for the work of Solar Austin. Love to see our women of solar out here helping the people, so welcome. I would say, Build San Antonio Green here in San Antonio, we are a nonprofit organization for those of you that don't know us, but we're also an official partnership of the City of San Antonio, CPS Energy, and Bexar County. And we were founded to reduce emissions here in our community. Now, I'm a San Antonio girl. I was born and bred here. And, I've spoke on this many times publicly. I was really inspired to go into this work because of the, I lived in extreme poverty during my teenage years. And, I went a long time without power or water. And, so this is kind of why I devoted my life to public service in this space. And, it's really helped shape, I think, our work at Build San Antonio Green, all of our partners. Our spirit, our mission is to improve the quality of life of the people of San Antonio through our work. So that's just kind of like where we're coming from. We really work in I would say 3 areas that are I'm excited about. I guess the first way is, our green building program. Build San Antonio Green, we were designed to be an affordable green building program. Right. So when I first started out, green building was $1 million homes. It was, very expensive. And our dream was to create a program that was accessible and affordable for all of the people of San Antonio. So, we've been running that program now. I guess I've been director almost 18 years. And to date, we've worked with builders, developers at every price point. We work with the San Antonio Housing Authority, we're a very proud partnership with them. They're one of the largest housing and oldest housing authorities in the United States. Together, we have certified about 29 million square feet of certified buildings here in San Antonio. For our energy community out here, that's about 21 megawatts of peak demand reduction, which equates to about 348 million pounds of CO2, 266,000 pounds of NOx, which is like taking about 29,000 cars off the year. And that's, part of our spirit of San Antonio is that, we want to improve the lives of everyone, not just people at a higher income bracket. And that's something that is very important to me as executive director, that's like my guiding light, is to provide equity, access to everyone. So that's kind of the dream. Our second piece is our program, Bring Solar Home. Bring Solar Home is designed to be a free, unbiased technical resource to help the people of San Antonio to go solar on their home or business. When I first started out, when we all started out, there was like, I don't know, a handful of solar companies in San Antonio. And today, because we have been so successful, I think we have somewhere around, fully loaded, everything included, somewhere around 764 megawatts of solar power within CPS Energy in a diversified way. Today, there's like 100 solar companies that are listed as solar companies with CPS Energy. So, the consumer out there is really, has a lot of companies that are advertising towards them, and they're not really sure maybe how to navigate that. So because we don't buy or sell anything, we provide this free technical service to help, walk through what is your potential for solar. Let's look at your bills. This is how you kind of read a quote. This is the difference between these quotes, and we'll kind of help walk you through that whole process at no charge. So again, Bring Solar Home, we're trying to provide that unbiased technical expertise to everyone. The third piece, and this is a major passion area of ours, is climate readiness and resiliency planning. We're involved in many different wonderful initiatives here in San Antonio, one of which I had the privilege really in being co-chair of, which was our SA Climate Ready Plan. Our SA Climate Ready Plan really has two main pieces, and it's at the end of the day, it's about emissions reduction and our goal of being carbon neutral emissions by 2050 and our strategic pathway there. And the second piece is adaptation. All of this is done through an equity lens, right? San Antonio, we're 300 years old. We have, a whole history of redlining here in San Antonio. We have, parts of town that were not all developed equally, and so climate readiness and resiliency, again, what we're trying to concentrate on is how do we, there's a lack of equity of infrastructure, right? People talk about equity all the time, and I think there's many different definitions of it. One of the things that I look at is things like infrastructure, and how can we make everyone in San Antonio, give them the tools to be climate ready. So we developed our Climate Ready program, which is still a green building, but it's really looking at this climate resiliency piece. And again, the dream is that we help to kind of re-engineer San Antonio in a more equitable way that will help people be resilient in the future. That's the dream.
That is the dream. Thanks for that, Anita. And so we did have a question come in about barriers to home solar, and you've already sort of touched on solutions with that in regards to education and community programs and such. So I want to sort of expand this question to what are the biggest barriers to your organization's top priorities as you both just laid them out? Whoever wants to jump in first.
Well, if you had a big blank check that you could just drop on every person in San Antonio, we would have no problem, right? Well, that's a horrible joke, but I think there's a couple of pieces, right? And it depends on what level you're looking at things. Us as an organization, again, we've been out here working alongside many organizations. There's so many people out here that we're really trying to work towards this goal out here in the community. I would say for myself, I see it's back to the basics. It's like, listen, especially now after COVID, especially after the pandemic, we see kind of a polarization of two pieces. Piece number one is that person who is like, oh, I'm all this consumer demand. I'm worried about the power going out. I have more money. I'm going to start buying, the more solar. I'm going to buy batteries. I'm going this route. And then you have the other person who is like, it's accelerated the need to look at affordable power. And, we have energy poverty in our community, and people are out here just trying to pay their bills. And so I think obviously today, when you ask that question, it's a little bit different than I guess in some ways it's a little different than had you asked me that in the beginning of 2020 or in 2019. So again, I mean, I think we have a lot of challenges out here because of the pandemic and because of Winter Storm Uri that we all experienced. Again, it's affordable access for everyone. If somebody, dropped a blank check, and also I think people sometimes they don't know where to start. And that's something I know Solar Austin is working on. That's something that we're working on. Something, again, there's so many people out here. It's a really big question. I would say it just really depends on the level that you look at it. Tatiana, what do you think?
You honestly, I mean, I typed a couple bullet points that I wanted to hit, and you named all of them. So at the risk of repeating, I actually completely agree. Funding is one of the major barriers, I would say, not only for the populace at large, but also for organizations that are working at the grassroots level. You are competing against some really heavy hitters in any arena as a 501c3 fighting to be an educational conduit, and there are so many worthy causes, and I have spent most of my life in nonprofit fundraising, and I know there are so many interesting and innovative ways that funds can be directed directly to consumers and community, and oftentimes a 501c3 is one of the better conduits of that. But times are tough, and I think that communities have a lot to think about. So with that, I think my immediate next answer of any potential barrier for us accomplishing our goals, I have dreams of a world where all of our community entities that are working at the grassroots level just collaborate so much more efficiently and effectively. I think that we have so many great people in the fight, especially in terms of renewables. And I joke all the time, I say Gen Z just hits different, because when I talk to those who are growing up now, the conversations of climate and renewables are a part of their everyday vernacular in a way that is completely foreign to even me as a millennial. It just wasn't a part of what we considered. We weren't thinking about energy consumption. Some other countries, it's been top of mind for years. They know exactly how much energy they're consuming based on cost or demand or whatever fact of life has made it like non-negotiable for them to understand. But we have been very lucky in the United States to not have that lens. And with that, we have had a lot of entities pop up in the interest of educating, informing, advancing, creating equity. And I just wish there was a better network so that we could each play on those strengths and kind of stay in our lanes. And with that, I have dreams of grants that would be given to like 12 community organizations to just go fight the good fight. But I do agree with Anita entirely. I think those are the main barriers I see.
If I can just, add something onto that. I mean, really, when you look at systemic poverty is a barrier. I mean, I can tell you this just from, when, where I grew up in my neighborhood, it's like, listen, even if you're doing well, it's like it took so many hours to get on the bus to go to college. I mean, it's so much effort out here, and people are just trying to make it, and I think that, having the credit scored there are a million ways to get solar if you have good credit and if you have the money. But is the problem is that we need everybody to be able to have access, and so this goes back to a diversity of options, and to really kind of come to that drawing board with creative solutions. And I think that has been happening over the past couple of years. And so I will say, in a positive way, I think that Winter Storm Uri and the pandemic will continue to accelerate that us going to the drawing board and kind of rethinking how we're going to provide access to everyone.
Okay, so let's start getting a little more specific about that whole process. So a lot of what I imagine you do is it requires lots of different stakeholders, not just city officials, but people on the ground and other nonprofits and maybe and contractors and the like to get everything, to progress all the ideas you're bringing to the city. So how do you go about mobilizing those stakeholders? How do you get involved at the grassroots level to make more equitable urban design?
I can start since you kicked off the last one, Anita. So I will say Solar Austin as a C4, we have the luxury of going straight to the person behind the chair with the gavel, whether that's at the municipal level all the way up to the federal level. We are able to be a voice of advocacy for affordable solar, for shared solar, for any policies that really can assist communities in prioritizing solar in their urban design. But in a perhaps more fun and more community-centered way. Solar Austin works to really just inject solar into communities that may have not heard of it otherwise. So we are working really hard. A few years ago, we started a program getting solar kits into elementary schools. So how are we teaching kids at an elementary level? How does solar, like, what is it? How does it work? What does that mean in terms of these big words that you hear in kilowatts and all of these things? How can we show technologically how power is generated? How can that teach from a very young age that solar is an option? And then for the grownups, we do programming all the way, as I shared, for pathways all the way in between. For grownups, we work to have monthly happy hours where all we do is get together and talk about solar. We're very proud to have kept that up virtually throughout the pandemic. And with that, we were able to really recruit speakers nationally to just talk about what are the most pressing things happening in solar. We have a really fascinating group that gathers. Some are, kind of the rough and tumble, been in it since the 90s. They know everything you could possibly know about solar. And others may be students who applied to our Pathways program and weren't accepted, and they're hoping to network or whatever it is. And so in terms of education and community involvement, we try to just spread the word across all generations. And something that we're really ramping up now is actually doing community installations on other nonprofits and creating resiliency hubs within communities. So we are very proud to have just recently partnered with the Children's Haven in East Austin, a primarily overlooked and underserved community for a lot of time. And we were recently working with a group and some companies that were willing to donate their time and equipment and manpower and installation to create a resiliency hub in a community that maybe hasn't seen solar. And we all know the solar is contagious mindset. As soon as you see it on someone's roof, all of a sudden you think it's accessible. And maybe it is more so in that situation. But for these purposes, we intentionally selected a nonprofit that works with unhoused children, those who may be in the foster system or otherwise may just have needs to go to this agency for support. And we really believe in what that symbolizes, how solar being truly one of the most accessible forms of energy we have on planet Earth. How can we actually show communities this is a place you can go for a URI or for charging your cell phone if you're out and about, whatever it may be. We want to really create those proof points in communities that it is tangible. You understand how solar systems work. And then the longer term, we would love to do both, have the education where we have those installations. So picture like a screen that's showing distributed energy of whatever is installed on that potential location. And then it's, all of the above. Solar is now a part of this person's everyday life, how they may have never interacted with it otherwise. So that was a brief spattering of many things. Anita, I would love to hear about your work in San Antonio.
No, I'm big fan, as you can tell from all the work that you do. And I would say, I was trying to think about, obviously we have a very long history, and we're also riding the wings of my predecessor and mentor, Solar San Antonio, and Mr. Bill Sinkin, who really helped light that. He was the spark that started a movement, at least down here in San Antonio. And so I was very fortunate to meet him when I was much younger, and here we are. Anyway, what I was going to say is, I think that conversation keeps changing. I mean, again, when I first came into this world, We were talking solar with the military, we were talking solar with utilities. My dream is to talk solar out here in the streets with like the people of San Antonio, because that's, how are we going to design these programs where it's accessible, right? So, we do that at Build San Antonio Green, and I guess in various ways is kind of not just around solar, but around resiliency. We have programs like Solar Fest that I was sharing with you earlier. We're getting ready for our 20th annual event in March. Keep our fingers crossed that we don't have to postpone it again. But obviously we work in our green building program to try to write in a lot of these pieces: solar ready, EV ready, electric vehicles, solar on your house, all of those things. We try to help to reduce the cost through a very large deployment of it. That's our strategy, right? So instead of having a handful of like off-grid, super, expensive systems in the beginning, we went for we're just going to go after, thousands of more affordable systems to help kind of ramp up the scale of this thing. And so, there's been different ways that plays out, but I would say this, I think we've learned a lot through the Bring Solar Home program. And again, because we provide this unbiased technical review for people, and we don't buy or sell anything, and we're not charging you for it, we get a lot of interesting questions, and it makes you think, right? It's one thing to live in a world of engineers and utility people and energy people, and we're all talking about it, but it's a different thing out here in the streets. And so having the helpline that you can call at Bring Solar Home and talk to our Bring Solar Home program manager, Kaylin, or, the process we've helped connect solar to tens of thousands of people in San Antonio. And it's those conversations out here with people that we learn the most about what people need. We talk about this all the time. That's one of that's the big dream, right? Is that how do we connect ourselves with the community? How do we listen to what they want? And so, and again, it takes a village. It's really everybody working across many, I'm one person sitting here that represents so many people working on this in San Antonio. And so we're also information sharing, because there's not one entity or one group or one person that can be the end all and know everything. We have to work together and challenge each other. We also are great partners with the city and CPS Energy. We information share, we learn a lot, but it's also showing up and saying, what about this? What about that? What about, how is this person that doesn't have the credit score, that doesn't have, the ability for financing, how, if we're just going to throw everything out, how can they get an electric vehicle? How can they get solar? Those are some of the really important conversations that we have. And again, I think, for me, how do we try to engage with people? I try to meet them on the level of out here in the streets.
That's amazing. And it definitely sounds like when it comes to getting putting these projects together, that a lot of the stakeholders do have are representing that diversity and inclusivity, which is good. Is the same true of the designers and decision makers at the top, or do they need a little bit of a perspective from all these other stakeholders you're working with?
Well, I'll just kind of jump in real quick and say, listen, I'm very proud of San Antonio, because I think we are and have been in the past couple of years in the beginning of a new era where we really we're first starting to look at things through an equity lens.
Feeling a butt coming on.
We got a lot coming. We have a lot going on. Back in oh my goodness, I can't remember the year, but it was before the pandemic. Everybody knows how that is. Okay, so it was 2018, 2019, somewhere in there. Our city for the first time passed an equity budget, meaning that we were going to fund infrastructure equally, not politically. And that was a big move for San Antonio. I mean, I'm oversimplifying that, but it was a big move. Again, we talked about our climate plan. So I would say, here in San Antonio, that is something that is really starting to permeate really every level of planning is this question of equity. And I think it's really exciting for many different ways, but it's really, again, for me, you know, my mission is to improve the lives of people and to help prepare them for the changes that are coming, and to improve their quality of life. And so again, that spirit of equity is really permeating. I'm very proud of the beginning, our first steps in this direction.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I've taken cold meds. And so I like really don't want to say the inappropriate thing. I think Austin, in terms of, I should disclose, a lot of my life has been spent in cities like Oklahoma City and Memphis, Tennessee. I'm originally from the San Francisco area. I'm originally from San Jose. I've traveled a lot internationally. And so I think I answered this question with all of that tapered. Austin is doing an incredible job in terms of equity and a sustainability focus. Austin is ahead of the game in a lot of areas, including policy. That said, I don't think that the policy world that we live in is in any stretch of the imagination designed for the least of these, if you will. And I think that that's kind of an undeniable truth. And I appreciate what Anita says about like meeting people in the streets, because I totally agree that there are some incredible policies and incredible budget lines that have been allocated within Austin in recent years. To answer the original question, at the highest levels of leadership, I actually think my experience is that most people are very pro solar and pro renewables, pro equitable urban design. But the actual getting there, I don't know that we are even on the same page sometimes. And with that, I saw the question in the chat of like, should we mobilize as sort of a public body of some kind? And my answer is a resounding yes. I have learned in my conversations with stakeholders and those who are the decision makers, it is oftentimes the tail wagging the dog, and you have to be a very vivacious tail at times as an average citizen. And unfortunately, those who we are advocating for in our communities do not have the knowledge, voice, or access to do that. So anyone who has any modicum of power or privilege, I'm always going to encourage to step up and speak on behalf of renewables, because no, we aren't there. And we have so many examples internationally of communities that have made really intentional urban design choices. And I even think of it like in New York, there's been a lot more planning of building design in terms of greenery and solar and things like that. And those are extremely simple solutions. But the fact that I have one city to point to that has done that sort of intentionally, I'm sure there are more. But within the United States, I think we do not have as many proof points as we need. Austin gives me a lot of hope, because I think Austin is very primed to be one of those proof point cities if we just let ourselves. And I think Texas as a state, we have nothing but opportunity to really double down in the world of renewables. We have the land, we have the personnel, we have all of the ability. I think we do need more people advocating that it is the only way to not only meet our goals, but to exceed goals and to hit some of that carbon neutrality that we're aiming for.
Thank you for that. That was a great answer. We are close to time, but we did get a lot of questions in from chat, so I do want to hit at least one of these, which was that. So here's one from Richard, who says, can we mid-level advocates for energy efficiency, sustainability, and equity organize to encourage changes at the sea level?
I would like to take that real quick. By the way, I opened the chat. There are excellent questions here, so thank you guys so much, because there's a couple of here I think that are just exciting. But on this one, I would this kind of is a follow up to what Tatiana and I were talking about. I mean, for me, it's like somebody's need to bust out a checkbook basically at the end of the day. So back to yes, and what that means is us engaging. Let me give you a good example. It's like what I was talking about earlier about we passed an equity budget in San Antonio. We can talk about equity all day long, but in terms of like climate resiliency, you can see if it rains, certain areas of town are going to flood and others are not because of a lack of drainage. You know, certain areas are going to have more power outages because the infrastructure is older. I mean, that's like one small piece. And so my question is, yes, engaging with our city, engaging with our stakeholders, because at the end of the day, we have an unbalanced system. At least in San Antonio, we have an unbalanced system, and that's across the board. And so and a lot of it does come down to what are the opportunities that we have. Like we have a bond coming out, right? We're going to do that anyway. So instead of putting in the old school sidewalk that's not going to work in a few years, is there something new that's the same cost that has a better life cycle? There's a million of these things. How are we going to spread out the park system? We've been working on that in San Antonio. How are we going to pay to upgrade these certain areas of town so that people have equitable access to just power, equitable access to just water, some of the basics? And I think, again, now more than ever is a great opportunity. Even though we are in such a challenging time, this is a major moment that everybody can come together on those things and have those conversations so that we can help to kind of, again, re-engineer our systems in a more equitable way. Sorry, I know that was a little long-winded, but I'm very passionate about that.
Oh,
That's perfect.
That's great.
I actually forgot the question because I was so invested in your answer.
It was basically how can mid-level advocates for energy efficiency, sustainability, and equity organize or unionize to encourage changes at the sea level?
So email, call your city councilor, email, call your local legislator, your federal legislator. I still believe very much in the power of reaching out to those that are in policy. Politics was made to be of the people, be a part of that process. I also would say engaging with groups like Solar Austin, and Anita, you have this incredible network in San Antonio. I think, honestly, be a part of those conversations. There are, as I shared, so many organizations. I feel like I can say in very good conscience, all of the entities that we work with understand the longer term goals in terms of resiliency and sustainability. And they often feel just as handcuffed to the bottom line or whatever it is that is keeping them from progressing forward. So the more noise that is made in a community, the easier it is for them to throw up their hands and be like, oh, well, we have to. The community willed it so. So rattle cages. And I would encourage people to engage with those at the local politics level. That's it. Your city councilors, your commissioners, your those who can really make those urban planning decisions for infrastructure locally. I think that's an often very overlooked and under lobbied group of folks that can really make a difference in the community for real, for real.
You know, I just kind of want to throw in one last thing. I think one of the really important things that I've learned over the many years in that is, you know, find your allies. You know, when you're in and so many of us are, you know, trying to change the world for a better place, right? And so instead of, you know, but what has happened a lot is you see, we're always, you know, trying to like overcome an obstacle or, you know, fight on this one thing instead of finding our allies and all coming together on the things that we agree on is very highly effective. And so, yeah, you know, find your allies and work together. Everybody loves a team up.
Yes, and I think, as we hit the end of the panel, I think those are both great messages to go out on. Someone posted a comment in the chat about how you know, some of the big problems about climate change, of which community solar and increased home solar adoption is a big part of it. You know, it has some structural and environmental barriers to it, and that aspect of organizing locally, finding like-minded people, and putting pressure on the people with local power that can implement things in the right direction is very much a big part of that. So I thank you both for doing that and for being here to discuss all of these interesting community community projects. And
Oh,
we're really
well,
excited to see how it keeps going.
thank you so much. And I'll see you all at ETS.
Oh, good plug.
2022.
Good plug. Thank you, Anita. And Tatiana, thank you also for being here. You've been great, and I hope we can chat more about these things in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who is here to join the conversation. And we're the last of the day, eh? Everybody.
The
Yeah.
last of the year. The
Last of the year.
We're ringing in 2022, y'all.
Now, I'll drink some water to that.
I know.
Tea with honey over here.
Oh, yeah.
Coffee. Well, listen, thank you so much. Tatiana, can't wait to meet you, and so excited about ETS next year. Though, what are the dates on that, Dylan? It's April.
Oh, you put me on the spot.
Sorry. We're so excited about it.
ETS 2022 is April 11th through 14th in Austin, Texas. You can go to the website and check all that out. I believe it's energythoughtsummit.com. And with that, I will pass it off to Joyce to close us out for the year.
I don't know
Thanks,
that there's
everybody.
to close out, considering that we got Anita and Tatiana rooting for us and ringing in the end of the year. Thank you, everybody, so much for your enthusiasm today, your time in discussing the future of all kinds of different things. Really great discussions on infrastructure, mobility, and equity. Big things are happening. I know that 2021 was a year of recovery in a lot of ways. So I think 2022, we're really going to see a lot of these things stretch further than that, which is just incredibly exciting. As Anita mentioned, we do have our Energy Thought Summit stuff up. We are going to be doing another one in 2022 in April. So please check out our website and register for that. We would love to see you, and stay tuned for more information on our upcoming City of the Future in 2022. With that, everybody have a fantastic holiday season. We will see you in the new year. Take care.